What we're looking at here is we're looking at what most people, I believe, in America would see as normal. I think most people in America would see this as the natural order of things, how the world's supposed to be. Most all the concrete you can see from here, the direction that camera's faced, was poured within the last 12 months. Because they made this new thing, they've invented this new thing where you drive on what used to be the wrong side so that you can get to the right side so that you can get to your freeway entrance without that down there, that once again, that's the concrete that we're assured we couldn't live without. The world that we're used to, that most people are used to, somehow looks very strange through my eyes, and I know it's just me, because everyone thinks this is what a world's supposed to look like, and whenever I say that we should quit this, that we should slow down and develop a walking speed culture, people tell me millions will die. The other thing they tell me is nobody will do that. I bought a light fixture today that I can use in one of my buildings. I didn't really need to buy it today in particular. I wanted to make these videos about climate change and about the way we're managing and mishandling our world. These strips of concrete that look like this one literally cover this continent from ocean to ocean, cover the United States portion of it from border to border. The speed limit is now 70 miles an hour, which is over 1 mile per minute, and I'm going roughly the speed limit. So we're now traveling more than 1 mile per minute, and because I have come so far from my home, I really need to travel this fast to get back there. So once you're here, once you're in this system, you have to participate in this system. And as we have discussed, the distribution of resources, the distance to shopping is essentially a function of the average speed of travel. So since we can go 70 miles an hour to go shopping, we must go 70 miles an hour to go shopping. And if we suddenly tomorrow couldn't go 70 miles an hour, then we literally suddenly tomorrow could not go shopping. We could not get the resources that we need. So for the short term, we are trapped right inside this thing that we're in. The first thing you'd have to do would be to widen the distribution of resources. People, the way the resources got to where they are now, these 70 miles apart, is that somebody hauled them there in long distance freight units, trucks, trains. Long distance freight units used to be caravans of camels or donkeys or horses or ox carts. But that's how the things get put in distribution places by people who make their livelihoods out of long distance travel and resource distribution, and then it's handled from that point. It's handled by people who make their livelihoods out of resource storage and reselling. The speed limit now is 55. I've got this little computerized Subaru, and so I just set the computer on whatever speed the sign says, and that's how fast I go. Unless the people in front of me go slower, in which case the computer detects them and it slows me down. But it doesn't go over, not a appreciably over. It'll get over 1 or 2 miles an hour. But it doesn't average over the speed I'm trying to go. And you can see out here where there's no difficulty in passing. People don't have to wait in line until they get a clear spot. This is 4-lane divided. And you can see out here the degree of widespread societal contempt that accrues to someone who, this guy here's worrying me, accrues to someone who goes no faster than the law allows. It's spooky, but it's okay. This up here, like that building there, they just built it. That was that humongous mound of concrete there. That's modern distribution. That's a warehouse, and from there they accrete and redistribute various viable resources. And when people couldn't travel as fast, that distribution centers had to be smaller and more widely distributed themselves. So if you could only go 10 miles an hour instead of, like I am now, 55, if that's how fast if everyone was limited to a walking speed, then the people who do the distribution of resources would distribute them differently, because that's all just the honest economic activity is providing for the needs of one another. None of us produce everything, and all of us need a wide variety of things, and so our original economic functions were to produce more resources of the kind we are able to produce than we personally needed, and then to use the portion we needed and to distribute the rest. That's no longer how it's done now. Whatever we do, the only resource we get typically is money, the medium of exchange, and then everything we need. We don't produce anything that we can get without money. All we produce is something that someone else gives us money for producing, and then with that money we get all the other things we need. But in the roots of an economy were that people produced more than they needed of whatever they produced, and then they traded amongst themselves. I've got more acorns than I need, and here I'll trade you some for those fish that you've got more of than you need, and that's how it all started. The original idea of the original economic opportunity is other people, and because that's how it works, then no one would ever arrange the resources they were trying to sell. Here our speed limit goes up to 65. No one would ever arrange the resources they're trying to sell so that they were farther apart than the people who needed them. But since, as I said, since we can go 65, 70 miles an hour, since we can go that fast, we have to go that fast. It's automatic. Humans don't gauge where they'll go by distance. They gauge where they'll go by time. How long is it going to take me to get there? And so, I'm an hour from home at 65 miles an hour, and if I had to go to the store and it was 10 miles, and I could only go 10 miles an hour, it would work exactly the same. There would be no difference. So, what it would require a lot of effort and a lot of thinking over the course of 3 to 5 years to redistribute resources to where people could get them without going so fast. But it would not in the long run, it would not have a humongous difference, except there'd be a lot more opportunity for people to do what amounts to long haul freight, because it would take more. Our culture is man hour efficient, person hour efficient. That is to say, we can produce a lot of stuff per person hour, which is why we are also freaked out and desperate about finding jobs and getting ways to get jobs, because we have too many people for the needs, and so we have to make a bunch of stuff that nobody needs and then we have a whole industry called advertising that tries to get people to desire things they don't need, so that they will spend their money for them, so that somebody can earn a living producing them, and somebody else can earn a living shipping them, and somebody else can earn a living putting them on shelves, and somebody else can earn a living standing at a cash register and checking them out. And the whole deal. I mean, that's how an economy works. Is all the needs and all the desires and all the people have to come together in some balance to where everyone can find a productive means of making their own livelihood. And if we couldn't produce as much per man hour, then we wouldn't have to throw away as much. There's a direct relationship there. The more stuff we produce per man hour, once you're past, I don't know, what are we past? Do you reckon one person can produce more in an hour than 1,000 people can use, or 10,000 people can use? I don't know what those numbers are, and I don't know how to get them even. But once you're past a certain imbalance to where the amount we can produce is vastly more than the amount we need, and then it has reached a place where it's even vastly more than the amount we want left to our own devices, and that's why there has to be a huge industry, an incredibly profitable industry, I might add, in whipping up desires. That's this whole advertising industry. It's all about getting people to want stuff that they don't need. And people will buy what they need. You don't need to tell somebody to go out and buy a bar soap. If you sell soap and a million other people sell soap and you want them to buy your soap, then you have to badger them to buy your soap instead of the other guy's soap, and you have to tell them that your soap is clearly superior than the other guy's soap. But ultimately, you still don't have to tell them to want soap. Most people are going to go get soap because they want some, because they feel that they need it. And the same thing with shoes. You don't have to badger people to buy shoes. People buy shoes. You have to badger people to buy new cars before they wear out the old one, because ultimately there's not that much functional difference between a car and a washing machine. It's just an appliance. It's there to do a job. And if your car will get you to and from the grocery store at 70 miles an hour, you don't need a new one. So then you have to have this whole advertising thing to whip people into desiring one, to make them believe that somehow it will make them more sexually appealing to members of the opposite sex, or that it will make them appear more affluent, and therefore rise higher in the eyes of their fellow humans. You have to find some way to get people to want a car that they don't need. And pretty much the whole industries, all the industries of advertising are based on that principle, that if everybody doesn't buy a lot more than they need, this economy will go belly up. This thing we call growth is at this level. Now, it's not automatically this way, but at the level we are now, this thing we call growth is entirely based on people buying more stuff than they could possibly need. I mean, look how fat everybody is. If everybody ate a healthy amount of food, we would have a recession in our food economy. I'm not kidding. I mean, literally. If every American ate the amount of food they need to maintain good health, vigorous strength, be well nourished, have enough flesh on their bones to carry them through a downtime, a sickness where they couldn't eat, to be sufficiently fed with a modest surplus. If everyone in America dropped to eating just that amount, we would have an immediate recession in our entire food industry. The grocery store industry would have a recession. The food shipping industry would have a recession. The food processing industry would have a recession. Our whole economy is based on getting people to consume more than they need, and literally more than they want. And the place from which all that more is being extracted is it's being extracted from our finite planet. And none of it is being fully accounted for. We're not accounting for the topsoil that we ship to China with our soybeans. We're not accounting for the topsoil that we ship to the Gulf of Mexico or the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean with our grains. We're not accounting for the water. We're extracting resources, and after the extraction, there remains less of that resource than there was before the extraction. Now, I understand that the Earth looks pretty big, and that from when we could only go a walking pace, I couldn't comprehend this whole ball of rock and life that we live on. It appeared that there could be no end. But we know now that there can be an end. And we know that we can't endlessly extract, leaving less than there was before. Now, on the surface of the Earth, we can produce food for ourselves, and we could literally endlessly extract nutrition for ourselves and return our feces and our urine to the ground. And even then, there would become some quantity where the Earth could not maintain us anymore. But that number would be a lot higher than it is now with the way we're doing it now. The way we're doing it now is, well, it's always been finite. You know, everybody's laughed at Malthus because he had a whole wrong time frame, and I may have the whole time frame as wrong as Malthus did. You know, this could last 500 years. And, you know, 500 years ago, Europeans were already walking on this continent. So 500 years isn't really all that long. You know, when you think about the Earth being 4.5, 5, 6, 7 billion years old, I hear different numbers, but I've never heard one below about 4.5. Not from anybody real. When you think about the humankind, Homo sapiens, our exact kind, you know, humans which were in all way modern except for their behavior, which is to say we looked like us, we thought like us, we talked like us, we acted like us. We go back at least exactly like us, at least 50,000 years. Anatomically modern humans, people who look just like us, go back at least 150,000 years. And So when you look at that and you think, oh well, you know, we're not gonna cash in this whole world for 500 more years. It's like, whew, that's kind of selfish, isn't it?